Hey guys, tonight we journey into the sun-drenched deserts of ancient Persia, where the sun blazes overhead, the sand burns beneath your sandals, and the mere thought of wool socks would make even the sturdiest camel faint. You're standing under the shimmering sky of the Iranian plateau, the air so dry it crunches in your lungs, and you're probably wondering, how did anyone survive here, let alone build cities, palaces, and libraries? The answer isn't just survival, it's comfort. Real, thoughtful, engineer-approved comfort, without a single electric fan or freezer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your current location and local time. I love seeing our little bedtime history community stretch across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a dusty caravan trail, sun high above, your robes clinging to your arms as sweat beads up and instantly vanishes. In the distance, there, a smudge against the horizon, you spot a low, thick-walled structure made of sun-baked mud bricks. A caravanserai. Like a desert lodge for traders and travelers, it promises not only shelter and safety but, miraculously, shade and cool air. You step through its heavy wooden doors and feel it immediately. The temperature drops. Not drastically, but just enough to make you sigh. No fans. No breeze. Just ancient science. The walls around you are over a meter thick, made of adobe, mud mixed with straw, cured by the sun, stacked high and dense. These walls are like the desert's version of memory foam. They absorb heat slowly during the day and release it at night when the desert flips into a chilly echo chamber. You sit on a stone bench near a small courtyard and run your hand along the warm, not hot, wall. It feels oddly alive, like it knows the sun's schedule better than you do. Inside, light filters through narrow slits high up in the walls, tiny windows, positioned to let in just enough brightness but no direct sunlight. They're often placed to the north, the direction of least heat in the northern hemisphere. This way, the interior stays softly lit but never roasts. Water jugs made of porous clay, called zairs or zair pots, sit in the corners, glistening faintly. You touch one. As water seeps slowly through the walls of the pot, it evaporates on the surface and takes heat with it, chilling what's inside. It's an evaporative cooling system you can carry. A 2,500-year-old refrigerator with no plug. A servant pads past you carrying a tray of dates and yogurt. He offers you one with a polite nod. You accept because why not? It's your desert fantasy. The yogurt is cold. Actually cold. You look around, bewildered. Is there a magic ice cellar? Just shadows, clever architecture, and centuries of inherited know-how. Historians still argue whether these early caravanserais were engineered primarily for comfort or practicality, whether coolness was a welcome side effect of protection from bandits and the elements, or whether temperature control was a fundamental design principle. But given how delightfully tolerable it feels right now, you're leaning toward the latter. A short distance away, a group of camels settle in, curling their legs underneath themselves and sinking onto the sand like giant beanbags. The stable where they'll spend the night is partially sunken into the ground. This isn't just a happy accident, it's deliberate. Digging even a few feet down into the earth can shave off precious degrees of temperature, creating naturally cool pockets. Camels like it. So do traders. So would you, if the floor under your mattress could stay a steady 68 degrees without help from a power grid? You follow a narrow corridor that leads deeper into the building. The air gets heavier, darker, cooler still. The passage curves, forcing hot breezes to twist and slow down. The floor is smooth stone, imported from cooler, mountainous regions, and it too seems to defy the heat outside. One room opens to a sunken courtyard with a small pool at the center. Not for swimming, just for existing. The water reflects light gently upward, dappling the underside of the arches. There's no splashing or movement, just stillness. and stillness cools. You sit by the pool and stare into its surface. It mirrors the beige walls, the faded blue tiles, and the occasional feather that floats gently down from nowhere. Even the birds know this is a good spot to linger. A passing elder pauses to fan himself lazily with a woven palm frond. He eyes you kindly and mumbles something you don't understand, but it sounds like a joke. You smile. He gestures to the pool, then points to the ceiling. You follow his hand and spot a high vent, a badger. You'll get to know that term well. Tonight, it's going to be one of your favorite words. As the afternoon stretches on, a gentle rhythm settles over the lodge. Traders sleep inside rooms. Horses stomp softly. Water drips somewhere in the background. Your eyes begin to close. The desert may be ruthless, but the Persians were even more clever. And the sun? It still burns outside. But you're nestled in one of the world's oldest climate-controlled spaces. You rest your head against the stone and listen as the cool continues to hum its ancient lullaby. You wake with a yawn that barely escapes your lips, greeted not by the sting of dry heat but by a whisper of cool air brushing against your face. Above you, the ceiling arches into a soft dome, broken only by a slender opening, more of a slit, really, that appears to be pulling air upward. It's not magic. It's Persian physics. You're lying directly beneath a badger, a wind catcher, and while it sounds like something invented by a fantasy novelist, it's very real and very old. The ancient Persians didn't just survive the desert, they invited the breeze inside and gave it a tour. A badger isn't a fan, and it doesn't blow. It's more of an air butler. Tall, thin towers built above rooftops, they act like noses sniffing out the faintest trace of wind. Once caught, that breeze is funneled downward through vertical shafts, often moistened with damp surfaces or shallow pools, and finally released into the living spaces below. It's the architectural equivalent of saying, "Here, dear room, let me freshen you up." You shuffle toward the courtyard where one of these towers looms overhead. It's rectangular and rises above the roof like an old chimney that forgot to belch smoke. Inside, internal veins channel the airflow with careful geometry. Each side of the tower can open or close depending on the wind's direction. And if there's no wind? Not a problem. Hot air inside the home rises naturally, and the badger becomes a kind of chimney, pulling warm air up and out. You stand in the stillness of the courtyard, gazing upward, feeling that same gentle breeze from earlier. It's not strong. It's not forceful. But it's there, a constant exhale from a 2,500-year-old system. Historians still debate exactly where the first badgers appeared. Was it in Yazd, the desert city still full of them today? Or did earlier prototypes exist in even older settlements, long buried beneath layers of dust and time? What's agreed upon, though, is their uncanny efficiency. In a well-designed house, a badger can drop the temperature by as much as 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. That's not comfort, that's survival dressed in elegance. You step into a room directly beneath a badger shaft. A shallow basin of water rests beneath the vent, its surface quivering gently. The breeze hits the water, and the evaporation process cools the air further. You lie down on a nearby mat and close your eyes again. This isn't just passive cooling, it's passive hospitality. And the best part? No buzzing wires, no humming machinery. Just wind, water, and time-tested physics. A cat slinks across the floor and curls beside you, clearly enjoying the same microclimate. Even the animals have figured out where the sweet spots are. The Persians weren't the only ones to tinker with the wind. Similar concepts emerged independently in Egypt, the Indus Valley, and later in medieval Islamic architecture. But few cultures elevated the windcatcher to an art form quite like Persia. Some were decorated with tiles, others etched with poetry, literal verses praising the breeze. You open your eyes and glance at the walls. There it is, painted faintly along the plaster in blue script. "O breeze of dawn, carry sleep to the tired heart." You can't help but smile. There's a peculiar fringe belief, though largely dismissed by mainstream historians, that certain towers could be tuned, like instruments, to whistle softly as wind passed through them, creating a constant lullaby in some homes. Whether true or not, the image lingers. A house that sings you to sleep. You walk back out into the courtyard. Overhead, storks have made a nest atop another badger, unbothered by its purpose. The tower still works, even with a few feathered tenants. Down a side corridor, you find a small room built with a curious layout. Its floor sits several feet lower than the rest of the house. You descend the stone steps and instantly feel the difference. This is a shapeston, a subterranean room for sleeping. It's a common feature in Persian homes, and when combined with the flow of air from the badger, it becomes nature's own air-conditioned bedroom. You lie on a low platform and exhale deeply. The breeze from above is still with you, guided down into the earth like a gift from the gods. Or at least a polite suggestion from a well-informed architect. Historians still wonder how universally accessible these cooling systems were. Were they features of elite homes only? Or could common folk install simpler versions in their dwellings? The evidence is scattered, but one thing is clear: cooling was not merely a luxury. It was a necessity, and one pursued with creativity and precision. As the day outside reaches its peak heat, you rest in this pocket of carefully curated comfort. You start to wonder, if you could somehow bottle this moment, sell it as ancient air conditioning in a jar, would anyone believe it wasn't just another essential oil scam? Probably not. But lying here, cooled by clever stones and captured wind, you realize something. Sometimes, the old ways don't just deserve respect, they deserve a nap. And you're more than ready to take one. The sun still blazes outside, somewhere up there, in the pale white sky that feels closer than it should, but down here, beneath layers of mud brick and logic, you're wandering slowly through a domed corridor with thick walls and shaded alcoves. You've stepped into a Khanate house, and the air smells faintly of dust, stone, and something cool and mineral-rich. That scent is coming from underground. A low archway ahead beckons, and when you duck through it, you hear the unmistakable murmur of water. Not rushing, not splashing, just a persistent whisper, as though the earth itself were breathing beneath its own skin. You're standing above one of ancient Persia's greatest engineering achievements, the Khanate. Imagine needing water in a desert, but instead of waiting for rain or building a well, you dig a tunnel, sloping ever so gently from a mountain aquifer to your home, miles away. No pumps, no pulleys. Just the quiet pull of gravity. That's a Khanate. A miracle with no moving parts. You lift a clay lid and peek down into one of the vertical shafts. A damp wind hits your face like nature's own face mist. At the bottom, far below, is a narrow stone tunnel carrying fresh water in a silent stream. You can't see the water, but you feel it, like the ghost of a river humming beneath your feet. These Khanates were often dug by hand, one shaft at a time, some stretching over 70 kilometers. That's the distance of an ultramarathon, underground, in the dark. It's estimated that in ancient times, Persia had over 50,000 Khanates. Not bad for a civilization with a severe lack of Amazon Prime delivery. And here's the real genius. These underground aqueducts didn't just supply drinking water. They cooled homes. You feel the breeze again. It's drifting through the underground tunnel, slipping up into the house via a clever little duct. When combined with a badger, the system becomes symphonic, wind from above, cooled by water below. You're essentially inside an ancient climate-controlled sandwich. Historians still argue whether the original concept of the Khanate came from early Mesopotamia or was born solely on Persian soil. But the oldest confirmed Khanates trace back over 2,700 years, long before the Achaemenids ruled the empire. That's pre-Socrates, pre-Buddha, pre-alarm clocks. And even today, in parts of Iran, people still drink from and rely on active Khanates. If something works for nearly 3 millennia, there's no rush to reinvent it. A step further into the house reveals the Ab Anbar, a domed water cistern connected to the Khanate below. You touch its curved stone walls, which are cool to the touch, and admire the thick layers of waterproof mortar, some infused with ash, egg whites, and goat hair. It's like ancient insulation, but with a very specific recipe you probably don't want to replicate in your kitchen. The ceiling above the Abanbar is high and often domed, with small vents, gone bad, that help release rising heat while drawing up cooler air from below. In bigger cities, entire neighborhoods shared Abanbars, accessed through tall arched entrances and long, shaded staircases. You pause halfway down one of those stairs, hand brushing the smooth banister worn by centuries of palms. It's not just a trip down to get water, it's a slow immersion into something deeper. Not a bath. Not a ritual. Just daily life done with purpose. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some Abanbars were guarded by ice keepers. Men whose job was to tend to underground stores of winter ice, stacked in layers of straw and frozen snow, kept preserved well into the summer months. In a desert, before refrigeration, think about that the next time your freezer gives you grief. One of the strangest debates among scholars centers on how exactly they dug the Kanets so accurately, maintaining a precise slope for miles. Some say they used water levels in reeds. Others claim early forms of plumb lines and spirit levels. A few even believe they relied on well intuition, a sixth sense among experienced diggers. That last one, naturally, is harder to prove with charts. You brush your fingers against the edge of the open shaft again and listen. Just for a moment. It's comforting, the sound of effort, of care, of ancient people who looked at a sun-scorched landscape and thought, let's go underneath it. They didn't fight the desert. They danced with it, moved around it, cooled their homes not with resistance but with rhythm. You climb the stairs, leaving the Abanbar behind, but the cool still clings to your skin like a silk sheet. Above ground again, the badgers catch what little wind the afternoon offers, and the Kanets sigh below, pulling their ancient currents toward homes that never needed a thermostat. It's funny, some modern architects are just starting to rediscover this stuff. They give it fancier names like bioclimatic design or thermal convection structures. But really, it's just ancient Persian cool. And as you walk once more into the shaded hallways of this home, the air follows you like an old friend who's always got your back, especially when it's 45 degrees outside and you've run out of pomegranate sherbet. You press your palms lightly against a sun-warmed wall as you step into the inner courtyard, a hayat, a space that feels like a forgotten oasis tucked behind fortress-thick walls. In the middle of the courtyard, a rectangular pool glistens with still water, perfectly still, like a mirror laid out for the sky. You catch your own reflection, slightly flushed from the dry air, perhaps a bit dazed from your time underground, and it shimmers in that motionless surface. This isn't just pretty landscaping. In the world of ancient Persian architecture, this courtyard isn't for show, it's part of the cooling system. You are, in a way, inside a passive air conditioner. The pool, or house, helps to chill the courtyard air as it evaporates. That evaporation cools the space around it, and with the help of a breeze, say, one channel down from a wind catcher, your body begins to feel the shift. You sit on the edge of the pool, watching the water ripple slightly as a shadow from the sarpush, a wooden canopy, sways above you. A nearby fig tree hums quietly with bees. It's almost like the garden is breathing along with you. This method of building inward, focusing on courtyards rather than outward facades, wasn't just about modesty or privacy, it was thermal logic. The thick outer walls kept the worst of the heat out, while the courtyard stabilized interior temperatures. You're in the middle of a thermal buffer zone, and your body knows it. Mainstream historians agree. This courtyard model, internal cooling, shade, water, can be traced all the way back to Achaemenid and Parthian designs. The grand cities of Pasargadae and Persepolis included tiered gardens and courtyards, all carefully irrigated. But the idea truly flourished during the Sasanian Empire, when domed spaces and internal gardens reached architectural maturity. And then there's the subtle genius of floor-level changes. As you wander through a side doorway, you notice that you're suddenly walking slightly downhill. The room is lower than the courtyard, sunken. That's no accident. In ancient Persian homes, lowering the floor of certain rooms helped them stay naturally cooler. Cold air settles, after all, and the more of it you trap, the better your chances of getting through July. You slip off your sandals and sit on the earthen floor. It feels chilled. Not cold, like an air-conditioned mall, but contentedly cool. Like a shady stone bench in the mountains. Your spine relaxes against a plastered wall as you listen to a gentle breeze hum through a wooden lattice window. That lattice, called mashrabiyah in Arabic lands and often simply a screen here, filters light and directs air. It also lets you peek out without anyone seeing in, like the world's first one-way mirror, but made of carved cedar. Some homes had small openings in the roof, known as kishkin, positioned to vent out hot air at the ceiling. Others angled ceilings or created high vents that allowed rising heat to escape through cleverly hidden passages. You can't even see some of the exits unless you're looking from the roof, which, of course, you are now. You've climbed a narrow staircase to the flat rooftop, barefoot, careful not to stub your toe on the uneven stones. From up here, the city stretches out like an earthen quilt, mud brick homes, domed cisterns, minarets in the far distance. The roofs are alive with quiet industry, drying apricots, cooling clay pots, maybe someone napping under a linen canopy. The sun is still merciless, but here, above the street, above the noise, you feel oddly protected. Quirky detail time. Some families use the roof as their summer bedroom. Entire beds were dragged up here in June, and people slept outside for weeks. The air was cooler, the breeze more constant. Except, of course, when sandstorms blew through, or when the neighborhood cats decided to wrestle at 3 a.m. But hey, no place is perfect. And historians still argue about when the Persian courtyard design began to influence Mediterranean and Andalusian homes. Was it through trade? Conquest? Friendly architectural envy? You'll hear different theories depending on whether you're sitting in Shiraz or Seville. You descend again, slowly, back into the quiet rhythm of the home. As you walk through another hallway, your hand grazes plaster walls reinforced with natural fibers. Sometimes straw, sometimes horsehair. These helped prevent cracking and held the finish through dry spells. It's the kind of thing modern green builders might rebrand as eco-fortified lime render, but the Persians just called it walls. You pause before a wooden doorway, admiring the carving, geometric, repetitive, calming. Inside is a small sitting room with niches carved into the walls. Each one houses a jug of water, a bowl of dates, or a rolled-up woven mat. The floor here is covered in handmade rugs, and you lie down, your cheek pressed to a soft wool pattern worn thin by centuries of feet and naps. The silence is not really silent. It's full of whispers, air moving through stone, tree leaves tapping on walls, the faintest sound of water making its long journey beneath you. This house doesn't rush. It doesn't beep or buzz. It breathes with the pace of shade, wind, and centuries-old ideas. A place where people didn't just survive the desert, they outwitted it. And as you close your eyes, belly cooled by the stone, a light draft brushes across your skin. Somewhere, a badger angles the air, a canet hums far below, and a fig leaf flutters lazily against a sun-warmed window. A soft clinking sound draws you toward another room. Somewhere nearby, a ceramic jug is being lifted, maybe refilled. You pad toward the noise and find yourself in a storeroom, tucked behind a heavy wooden door. The smell hits you first, earthy, faintly sweet, maybe dates or dried mint, with that telltale chalky scent of old walls and long-kept clay. Lined along the walls are earthenware vessels, cool to the touch, many of them coated in a chalky white glaze. These aren't just decorative. They're the ancient Persian equivalent of a portable fridge. Known as zayr jars, these porous clay containers could actually keep water cooler than room temperature, just by sweating. You lift the rim of one and peek inside. The water smells clean. Your fingertips graze the surface, and it's definitely colder than the air. No magic. No electricity. Just physics. As moisture seeps through the porous ceramic and evaporates, it takes heat with it. Instant chill, zero energy bill. The jar sweats, so you don't have to. This technique, by the way, still confuses people who assume ancient equals primitive. But honestly, evaporative cooling is still used today. Swamp coolers? Same logic. Hydro flasks? We're basically late to the party. And this wasn't a one-jar situation. Homes often had whole walls built with shelves designed just for storing these jars, positioned in shaded areas with cross breezes. Water, one yogurt, yes, yogurt, were all kept cool with this method. And when you realize that milk was turned into dew, a fermented, salty yogurt drink chilled in these vessels, you start to appreciate the subtle genius in their menu planning. Some Persian families even buried storage pots halfway into the floor, especially during summer. Not just because it looked cool, although, let's be honest, sunken jar gardens do have strong minimalist Instagram energy, but because the ground was cooler than the air. The deeper you go, the more stable the temperature. That's geology helping your grocery list. Now you step outside again, this time into a long, arched corridor. It runs along the side of the courtyard, half shadow, half light. It's a summer corridor, designed to catch breezes while avoiding direct sun. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, swept smooth, and it's actually comfortable. In the middle of the desert. At noon, there's a stray cat lounging on a stone step, looking positively smug. It knows all the best cool spots. You, meanwhile, begin to wonder how many ancient Persians spent their summers copying that exact feline pose, curled against the stone, eyes half closed, eavesdropping on cicadas. You duck into another room, larger this time, with decorative muqarnas on the ceiling. These honeycomb-style carvings look like frozen music or sugar cubes gone wild. They weren't just for show. The cavities and protrusions helped disperse heat and sound, breaking up the echo and preventing hot air from gathering in one place. Some researchers even suggest these carved ceilings created micro-air currents, gently stirring the space like a slow fan. Historians still argue whether the original designers fully understood the physics or just liked the aesthetic. But honestly, does it matter? It works. And this room, this domed space, was often the heart of the house, where guests were received, meals shared, sometimes poetry recited. There's a dignity to the space, quiet and unpretentious. The only sound now is your own breath, and maybe the gentle hum of a bee outside. Then there's the cool room trick you nearly miss, a small opening in the wall near the floor, like a mouse-sized tunnel. But that little vent? It's where cool air from the Cannet system sneaks in, drawn from below, creeping across the floor. You crouch next to it. A stream of coolness wafts over your fingertips. Ancient air conditioning, no wires involved. Back in the day, some homes even kept ice. In the desert, we're talking Yakshul, the ancient Persian ice pit, which we'll get to soon. But for now, this room doesn't need ice. It has the next best thing. Design that understands wind, water, and shade better than most people do their own thermostats. And quirky fact incoming. Persian homes often had scent zones. You heard that right. Walls were rubbed with rose water, mint was grown in planter jars near the doors, and sandalwood chips might be tucked under cushions. Because when the breeze passed through, it carried perfume with it. Your very own scented AC. Take that, Glade plugins. As you settle into a cushion near the wall, you catch a faint trace of something in the air. Lavender? Or maybe basil. Whatever it is, it mingles with the earth and dust and ancient cool, and you feel your muscles go slack. Just a little. Outside, someone pulls a woven reed blind over the courtyard wall. The light dims slightly. The air is still moving, still whispering. No buzzing lights, no vents grumbling on. Just architecture doing its job with grace. And now, let's talk sleeping arrangements. Because yes, that also tied into cooling. Families often moved beds from room to room depending on the time of day. Day naps happened in north-facing chambers, which stayed cooler thanks to limited sunlight. Nights were spent in upper rooms with open windows, or even, as mentioned before, up on the roof. You imagine dragging a rolled mat, a light quilt, and a water jug up those steps as the stars appear, one by one. Crickets tuning up like a sleepy orchestra. A dog barking 3 rooftops over. A child laughing, briefly, then silence. And then you, easing into sleep with a breeze across your neck and the scent of the jasmine vine clinging to the courtyard wall. It worked, didn't it? For them. For you now. You're not just learning about how they kept cool, you're starting to feel it in your bones. That balance between design and comfort, between utility and beauty. Ancient solutions with the precision of poetry. You stir gently, as if you've already dozed off and the story's just been rolling past you. The stone underfoot is cool now, whether it's dusk settling in or your senses finally adjusting, you can't quite say. But there's a hush to the light that tells you the day is winding down. And maybe that's a good time to turn your attention to something rather monumental, literally. It rises like a giant cone in the distance. Odd, isn't it? Like someone dropped an upside-down beehive in the desert and called it a day. But this isn't a mistake in urban planning. You're looking at a yakshal, an ancient Persian ice house. Yes, we've reached that part of the story, the part where people living in blistering, bone-dry heat manage to make and store actual ice without any modern equipment. You probably won't survive this level of cleverness. Not in flip-flops, anyway. The structure itself is made of saruj, a special mix of sand, clay, egg whites, yes, really, lime, and goat hair. Weird combo, but the result? Super strong and, more importantly, highly insulating. This stuff repels heat and water like it was designed by a very picky genie. The yakshal was more than just a building. It was a marvel of both thermal inertia and social logistics. Here's the trick. During the cold desert nights of winter, shallow pools near the structure would collect water. Come nightfall, temperatures would drop, and the water would freeze naturally. During the day, workers would chip that ice and carry it, sometimes in linen-wrapped bundles, into the yakshal, where it was stacked in layers, often packed with straw or other insulators. Ice in the desert, like magic, but with a little back pain involved. You wander around the base of the structure. It's quiet. No tourists. No ropes. Just you, the hot breeze, and this improbable pyramid of cold. You press a palm to the side, and while it's not exactly refrigerator cold, it's cool. You can tell something ancient is working behind those thick, tapered walls. Now, the inside of the yakshal? It's hollow and deep, like an inverted well. Descending into one would mean climbing down a spiral path, each step echoing slightly. The air cools as you go. At the bottom, you'd find a pool of melted runoff, sometimes reused, sometimes drained. That was the ice vault, the summer prize hidden deep in the belly of a winter's labor. And if you're wondering what on earth they did with this ice, well, they used it for a lot more than just impressing dinner guests. It cooled food, preserved medicine, created treats like faluda, a noodle-like frozen dessert flavored with rose water and lime. Imagine slurping that while lounging on a rooftop under the stars. Not bad for 500 BC. There's even evidence that ice from these structures was transported across regions, a kind of early refrigerated trade, with caravans ferrying blocks wrapped in layers of felt and straw. Historians still argue whether this was a luxury for the elite or a more widespread community benefit. But what's clear is that the technology existed and was deeply embedded in the rhythms of life. You lean back on a sun-warmed stone and picture the scene. Artisans laying saruj with painstaking care, children sneaking sips of melted ice, camels shuffling past under woolen loads. A whole civilization orchestrating its seasons, storing winter inside a cone for use in July. Frankly, it puts your freezer drawer to shame. And then there's the drama of it all. Imagine standing at the lip of a yakshal during a dust storm, that massive conical shape emerging like a ghost ship through the golden haze. Or arriving at one after a blistering journey, parched and stumbling, only to sip sweet, cold water from a jug pulled from its depths. That's the kind of memory your bones would keep. And here's your quirky tidbit for the evening. Some scholars believe that yakshuls were used ritually, too, not just practically. There are whispers of cooling spaces being connected to spiritual purification, or of ice being offered symbolically during Nowruz, the Persian New Year. Maybe it wasn't just about temperature. Maybe it was about renewal. Maybe it always is. You shift your weight and notice a little lizard doing push-ups on a warm rock nearby. Shof. You, meanwhile, are starting to appreciate just how layered and interconnected Persian climate strategy really was. They didn't just build one solution, they built dozens, each overlapping. Wind, water, geometry, insulation. Passive, active, poetic, practical. And now that you've seen the Great Ice Cone, you realize this isn't even the biggest trick up their sleeve. Some towns had urban layouts designed for airflow. Streets angled to catch the wind. Houses clustered to block the sun. Alleyways curved to trap shade in certain parts of the day. Nothing was random. Everything danced with the climate. In Yazd, a city known for its mastery of desert living, you could walk from sunrise to sunset and never once be scorched if you knew the right alleys. Some even say the city's winding lanes were designed to confuse invaders and sandstorms alike. Historians still argue whether that was intentional strategy or the happy result of 1,000 years of trial and error. Either way, the result was livable, breathable, survivable. You imagine a market day, the scent of spices trailing through the shaded lanes, children darting between water jugs, someone playing a stringed instrument behind a carved window. Even the heat would feel like a background character, present, but not dominating the stage. Your body responds without thinking, shoulders loosening, breath slowing. It's hard not to relax when even the architecture seems to want you to be comfortable. You're not being blasted with AC. You're being invited to coolness, enticed into comfort. A very different vibe from shivering in a grocery aisle. As twilight finally takes the stage, the sky behind the yakshul deepens to indigo. You watch as one by one, the stars begin to appear. You lie back against the stone, feeling the temperature fall, not fast but gently. Just enough to make you forget the sun's wrath from earlier. And you think, maybe they didn't just conquer the heat. Maybe they made peace with it. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not just a lack of noise, but the kind of full-bodied, velvety hush that wraps around you like a heavy curtain. You're no longer standing beside a towering yakshul or strolling through the shady alleys of Yazd. Now you're beneath the ground. Or at least, beneath something. The air feels denser here, cooler too, and scented faintly with damp stone and the ghost of ancient water. You're standing at the entrance to one of Persia's oldest, most quietly brilliant inventions, the Kanat. These underground water channels are so clever, so quietly epic, that it's almost absurd how few people today have heard of them. But that's okay. Because now you're here, squinting down a long, sloping shaft that disappears into darkness, listening to the trickle of water as it moves beneath the earth like a whispered conversation. So here's how it worked. Thousands of years ago, Persian engineers realized that snowmelt from the mountains could be captured, not in buckets, but in subterranean tunnels carved gently along the natural slope of the land. No pumps, no power, just gravity, stone, and sheer patience. These tunnels could stretch for kilometers, sometimes over 50 of them. It was basically ancient underground plumbing, except, built by hand with pickaxes and prayers. You duck your head and step forward into the Kanat shaft. It's narrow, just enough for one person to pass. And it's quiet, save for that same constant trickling sound. The water flowing beside you is crisp and clear, cooled by its slow, shaded journey through the earth. You dip your fingers into it, it's cold, like mountain breath. And it's been traveling for days to reach this moment. The builders of these Kanats weren't just thirsty. They were master geometers, working with rudimentary tools to measure the slope of the terrain so precisely that the water would flow, gently but reliably, without stagnating or flooding. Too flat, and it'd become a swamp. Too steep, and it'd erode the tunnel. They had to get it just right, across entire landscapes. And to maintain and access these tunnels, they dug vertical shafts, called wells or air holes, at regular intervals. If you were looking at the land from above, you'd see a line of neat little circles stretching across the terrain, like someone had rolled marbles into the desert and forgotten to pick them up. Historians still argue whether these techniques were borrowed from earlier civilizations or developed independently. The timeline is fuzzy and evidence is scattered. But what's undeniable is that Persia turned this into a sophisticated art. Some qanats are still in use today, quietly ferrying water to farms and towns, many centuries after the first trickle was set loose underground. Now imagine you're a worker digging one of these. You're crouched in semi-darkness, chiseling slowly through the rock. Above you, someone lowers a rope with a little lamp. Beside you, another man scoops loose soil into a bucket to be hauled up. It's dusty, grueling, and yet somehow beautiful. A tunnel that whispers with moving water. A gift to a village that hasn't even been built yet. The laborers were often seasonal, working in shifts. It could take years to complete a single qanat. And when it was done, it changed everything. Settlements that had no right surviving in the desert suddenly flourished, thanks to an invisible river winding its way through the deep. Of course, these things didn't just pop up on their own. They had to be maintained. Constantly. Sediment would build up. Collapses could happen. And so, in each village, there was often a designated caretaker, someone who knew the qanat like the lines on their palm. This person was both respected and slightly pitted. After all, who wants to spend their life crawling around underground? Still, the community depended on them. These channels watered gardens, orchards, and fields. They fed fountains and cooled homes. And they did it all without evaporation, a major problem in surface canals. The qanats protected water from the sun's greedy fingers. It's why you're not sunburnt and thirsty right now. And then there's the fringe stuff, the juicy tidbits that whisper through the stone. Some say certain qanats were booby-trapped to prevent enemies from poisoning the supply. Others tell stories of secret messages being ferried through the tunnels, or of lovers meeting at hidden wells under moonlight. You laugh softly. It's always lovers or spies, isn't it? There's even a theory floating around that some qanats aligned with celestial events. That their builders embedded symbolic meaning into the slope and spacing, turning practical infrastructure into sacred geometry. Historians still argue whether that's poetic imagination or architectural truth, but it's a lovely idea, isn't it? That water might have flowed in rhythm with the stars. Your steps echo now gently. You've been walking along the qanat for a while. You imagine how a town above you might look: mud brick homes, a central garden, laughter spilling over clay walls. All of it quietly nourished by this hidden stream beneath their feet. Like a secret handshake between the mountain and the desert. In fact, the entire layout of many Persian towns was built around qanats. Streets curved to follow the water's route. Homes were arranged so that the coolest ones got the freshest supply. And because the water emerged already cool, thanks to its journey underground, people didn't need to boil it or chill it. They just dipped a ladle and drank. Simple, elegant, genius. And speaking of elegance, some aristocratic homes had private qanat branches routed directly into their basements. Imagine that, your very own underground spring bubbling up into your wine cellar. Because apparently, once you've mastered desert survival, you might as well add a little flair. You pause at one of the vertical wells now, craning your neck to see the sky. A tiny blue circle, impossibly far away. You breathe in. The air smells faintly of limestone and something older. Something patient. You wonder how long this tunnel has been here. 100 years? 500? Some of these systems date back over 2 millennia. Still functional. Still flowing. A technology so deeply interwoven with its environment, it might as well be a natural phenomenon. Like wind. Or time. You sit for a moment, resting your feet beside the trickling stream. It hums quietly beside you, like a lullaby from the mountain. You could stay here forever, listening to the earth whisper its old, old secrets. And above you, life continues. Farmers in the fields. Merchants in the bazaar. Children chasing shadows down alleyways. All of them utterly unaware of the miracle flowing beneath their sandals. You emerge slowly from the Kanat tunnel, blinking against the sudden brightness. The sun still beats down, as if it hasn't noticed how clever the world is underground. Your feet crunch across packed earth, and you feel the stark difference between above and below. It's drier up here, scratchier, like stepping from a dream into a sun lamp. But the genius of the Kanat doesn't end with water delivery. No, this water has places to go, specific stops on its cooling, calming mission. And one of the most enchanting of those is the Persian Garden. You follow a narrow channel, just a shallow groove cut into the ground, lined with stones as smooth as soap. Water trickles through it from the Kanat, guided like a ribbon through the fingers of the land. It leads you to a large walled space, tucked inside a city that barely acknowledges its existence. This is the Paradise Garden, a Chaharbagh, for sections, divided with mathematical precision and threaded with water. You step inside, and instantly the air changes. Green, moist. Birds chirp. Leaves flutter. The difference from the desert outside is so profound, it feels vaguely illegal. In this heat? You didn't bring sunscreen for this level of betrayal. And yet, here you are. Shaded by pomegranate trees and cypress. Paths laid with mosaic tiles crunch softly beneath your steps. A fountain gurgles at the garden's center, fed entirely by the underground Kanat. You crouch to touch the water. It's still cold, as if it hasn't realized it's above ground now. And all around, the architecture seems to bend inward, wrapping the water and plants in a protective embrace. Here's the historical fact. These gardens were deliberate expressions of harmony. The design, 4 quadrants split by intersecting water channels, mirrored spiritual ideals. Water, fire. A nod to Zoroastrianism and Persia's pre-Islamic past. It wasn't just landscaping. It was cosmology with jasmine vines. And while paradise gardens existed elsewhere, Persia took the concept and ran with it like a kid in a sprinkler. They perfected the art of green space in dry places. In cities like Shiraz, Isfahan, and Kashan, these gardens weren't just noble status symbols. They were engineering marvels that turned brackish ground into tranquil oases. You settle on a stone bench in the shade of a mulberry tree. The air smells like figs and warm stone. The garden is quiet, except for the occasional flap of bird wings or the musical glug of water through clay channels. Somewhere nearby, a gardener hums softly as he trims a vine. You close your eyes and listen. And here's your fringe fact. Some gardens were designed to sing. Really. Engineers used the movement of water across carved stones, through ceramic spouts, and over tiny hidden instruments to create soothing melodies. Not loud enough to notice right away, but subtle enough that, over time, you found yourself humming along. Garden ASMR, 500 BC edition. Scholars still argue whether these sonic elements were widespread or only found in elite residences. Some claim they were symbolic, meant to guide meditation. Others think they were just for fun. Either way, it's hard to be cynical when your garden gurgles in key. And it's not just about the sound. These gardens were cool in every sense of the word. The water kept temperatures down, the plants created shade, and thick mud brick walls insulated everything. Add in wind catchers and cleverly angled courtyards, and you've got a microclimate so comfortable it makes modern HVAC feel needy and overcompensating. As you walk the paths, you notice little stone drains positioned just so, letting water overflow gently into side channels. Everything is planned. The shade, the scent, the breeze. Even the height of the trees is calculated to let in the winter sun but block the summer glare. It's like the garden is thinking for you, solving the heat before you even break a sweat. You pass a small pavilion, half hidden under a grape arbor. Inside, nobles once lounged on silk cushions, sipping sherbet and debating poetry, while a servant ladled cool water from a ceramic bowl. You lean on the doorway, picturing it. The murmuring, the clinking of a cup, the faint buzz of bees, the kind of scene that could lull even the most anxious mind into stillness. And then you spot something odd, a tiny channel running not through the garden, but along the wall of the house behind it. You follow it with your eyes, and realize that water from this garden is being siphoned through the building itself. Here's the secret. Persian architects often used garden water as interior air conditioning. By routing can-cooled water through basements and across courtyard tiles, they created natural refrigeration. Some even let water flow beneath their beds. Imagine waking up in the middle of summer to a chill rising from the floorboards. Luxury doesn't have to be loud. In the wealthiest homes, garden water fed private baths and wash areas, places cooled not by fans or ice, but by careful geometry. And you, walking through this garden centuries later, feel the ghost of that breeze. It kisses your skin as you pass under an archway, and you wonder how many summer afternoons melted away here, cool and slow. You pause by a flowering bush, watching bees move from blossom to blossom. The garden is alive in the quietest ways, roots sipping from below, leaves trembling in invisible air currents. You bend down and catch your reflection in the pool. It's faint, rippling. You look more relaxed than you felt 10 minutes ago. That's not an accident. Remember the start of this journey? The furnace heat streets? The desert haze that pressed on your chest? All of that evaporates here, neutralized by an ancient algorithm of green and shade and trickling cold water. No tech, no noise, just space designed for peace. And there's a deeper function too. Gardens weren't just places to escape the sun. They were a visual reminder of mastery, of the idea that, yes, humans could tame nature, not with brute force, but with patience and understanding. They didn't fight the desert. They danced with it. Even the plants themselves were chosen carefully. Many were drought-tolerant but fragrant. Roses, orange blossoms, basil, mint. Not just pretty, but cooling to the mind. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that your ancestors didn't waste time planting thirsty orchids. They made choices that whispered, "I get this place." And you do too now. A little. As you step away from the garden, brushing leaves from your sleeve, the sunlight no longer feels so harsh. You've seen what lives beneath it, and what grows in spite of it. You exit the shade of the paradise garden slowly, as if your limbs have forgotten what hot, dry sunlight feels like. It's like stepping from a dream into the mouth of an oven. The calm lingers though, tucked behind your ribs like the scent of rose water clinging to your clothes. But now, your gaze drifts upward, toward rooftops, towers, and something oddly elegant poking into the cloudless sky. There it is. A badger. A wind catcher. Not a flag or a lookout tower. Not even a chimney. It's something stranger, more beautiful, and infinitely cooler. Literally. From where you stand, it looks like a decorative tower, a vertical shaft rising from the roof with slits carved into each face. Some are square, some arched, some crowned with ceramic tile mosaics in midnight blues and pale greens. The top flares out slightly, almost like a tulip made of stone. You raise your eyebrows. It's an air conditioner. From ancient Persia. No wires. No humming compressor. No remote control you can never find. Just open air and architectural genius. You step closer to the building, an old merchant's home, and walk around until you can peer through the open doorway. The air hits you like a spell. Refreshing. It's 10 degrees cooler in here than outside, and no, there's no fridge humming in the corner. That's the badger at work. Here's your historical fact. Wind catchers were a staple of Persian architecture for centuries. Found in cities like Yazd, Bam, and Kerman, they were as common as chimneys in Victorian London. And their job? Capture the breeze, however faint, and guide it downward into the home below. Simple? But also shockingly effective. Badgers used vertical shafts to direct wind into rooms. If the wind blew from the right direction, It was caught and channeled straight down through the house. If there was no wind, the towers could use the difference in air pressure between the shady interior and sunlit roof to create airflow anyway. Nature. Outwitted. You climb a narrow staircase to the upper floor of the merchant house and find yourself beneath the mouth of the Badger. Above, sunlight filters in, muted by clay screens. You can hear the wind moving faintly, like a sigh. It flows down the shaft, glides across the room, and exits through small vents near the baseboards. That's not all, though. This wind is being cooled even more by water. In the room below, the cannet-fed water you saw earlier flows through shallow stone basins. As the air moves across them, it picks up moisture and drops in temperature, creating what modern engineers would call evaporative cooling. What the rest of us might call magic with mud bricks. You lean against the wall, watching dust motes dance lazily in the filtered light. You're not sweating. Somehow, impossibly, it's pleasant in here. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some wealthier households combined badgers with ice pits. Actual underground ice storage. They'd fill the pit in winter with snow brought down from the mountains, then insulate it with straw and mud. In summer, the cool air from the Badger would pass over the ice and become even colder before swirling into the rooms. You think your mini fridge is clever? These folks had seasonal HVAC before Rome even had windows. But Badgers weren't a one-size-fits-all trick. Some were designed to reverse flow, pulling hot air out rather than drawing cool air in. Others were connected to underground tunnels to circulate air below before pushing it upward again. Historians still argue whether certain multi-chamber Badgers were used primarily for ventilation, cooling, or even preserving grain stores. The answer might be yes to all three. You move back downstairs, running your fingers along the scalloped plaster of the walls. The plaster here isn't smooth. It's gently ridged, like waves frozen in motion. That's not just a decorative choice. Those ridges helped diffuse sunlight and scatter heat, keeping walls from turning into radiators during the day. Everything here, every brick, every groove, is pulling its weight in the battle against heat. In one of the rear rooms, you notice that the walls thicken dramatically. The windows are small and placed high. That's no accident either. Thick walls made of adobe or fired clay acted as thermal batteries, soaking up heat during the day and releasing it slowly overnight, like a giant architectural camel. You sit on a worn cushion in the corner. The silence is deep here. Not hollow but layered. There's the breeze, the occasional creak of wood, a distant clink of metal as someone moves in the courtyard. Nothing mechanical. Nothing artificial. Just the slow rhythm of air doing its job. You start to wonder what it must have been like to live in this house. To wake up to chilled morning air even when the desert outside was still broiling. To sit in the glow of oil lamps as the Badger overhead whispered wind through the rafters. To know that your home understood the sun and was built to tame it. A child runs past the doorway, barefoot, laughing, chasing a fabric kite on a stick. You smile. There's something about this setup that feels sustainable in the truest sense. Not just environmentally, but emotionally. A space designed to make you comfortable without noise, bills, or plastic gadgets blinking blue in the night. And you can't help but think how much of this knowledge we've forgotten. Today, we build glass towers in the desert and crank the AC until the grid groans. We cool boxes with bigger boxes. But the Persians? They caught the wind and let it do the work. Elegantly. Quietly. You run your hand along the stone edge of the basin again. It's damp. Cool to the touch. Somehow, this house, this technology, is alive. Responding to temperature. Shifting with the seasons. Listening to the landscape instead of shouting over it. Even the Badger itself, towering above, has an air of dignity. It doesn't try to hide. It's not a unit shoved out the window or a vent duct rattling in a ceiling. It stands proud. Decorative. Integral. A crown atop the house. As the sun begins to lower in the sky, you can see light slanting through one of the vents, painting the opposite wall with dappled gold. You stretch out along a carpet and let the breeze flow over your arms, your neck, your forehead. You could fall asleep right here. And maybe you will. As the late afternoon shadows grow longer, you rise slowly from the merchant's carpeted room, bones relaxed and mind slipping into that syrupy, pre-nap fog. You're not done yet, though. You shuffle out the door and back into the sandy alleys of Yazd, or whatever dream variant of it you've been drifting through. The wind still hums through badgers above you, but now your curiosity tugs you toward another marvel of ancient Persian ingenuity, the cooling systems that worked below ground. You've seen the Kanets, yes, and you've felt the breath of the badgers. But what happens when a home, or even a city, needs serious cold? Not just a pleasant breeze, but a place to store perishables, preserve meat, or keep sherbet from turning into sad soup. It's time to descend. You find the entrance to a structure that looks like a low mound topped with a conical dome, oddly geometric, like a pointed beehive built by an architect with a ruler fetish. This is a yakshal. And no, that doesn't mean yak chow. It means ice pit. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. In the middle of the desert. Here's your mainstream historical fact. These ancient Persian refrigerators could store thousands of cubic meters of ice, harvested in winter, often from nearby mountains or shallow ice pans outside the city walls. They were marvels of passive refrigeration. Entire families would rely on them year-round, not only for cooling but for making desserts, preserving food, and in some cases, displaying status. Ice was luxury, but a quiet, sandy kind of luxury. You duck through the low arched entrance and step inside. Instantly, the air drops 10, maybe 15 degrees cooler than the outside. The silence down here is soft and strange, like a secret being whispered from a long way off. Your footsteps echo against the stone-lined interior, and the dome above seems to rise forever, narrowing like the neck of a bottle. The floor beneath your sandals is packed earth, with faint outlines showing where blocks of ice would have once been stacked. Straw would be layered between them. The thick mud brick walls, sometimes up to 2 meters thick, are mixed with ash, clay, and goat hair, all treated with a waterproof glaze. These walls weren't just sturdy. They were thermal barriers, insulating the interior from the brutal desert sun like a mud brick thermos. The dome itself? It's more than just pretty. It funnels hot air upward and out, like a badger in reverse. The rising heat creates a convection current that continuously pulls cooler air inward from vents near the base. No fans. No electricity. Just geometry. And patience. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some yakshals were equipped with ice-making trenches nearby, shallow, stone-lined pools that froze over during cold desert nights. Locals would fill them with water each evening, then harvest the ice by dawn. It's the ancient version of an automatic ice maker, only it required a moonlit stroll and a sharp chisel. You press your palm to the interior wall of the pit. It's slightly damp, cool, and surprisingly smooth. You imagine yourself here on a sweltering day centuries ago, ducking in to grab a handful of snow, maybe pressing it into your face, or placing it into a copper tray to cool fresh fruit. Now, here's a favorite moment for scholarly quarrel. Historians still argue whether some yakshals were also used for food fermentation or whether that was a separate structure entirely. Some suggest dual usage, ice storage below, and dates or dairy fermenting in the cooler zones. Others insist that mixing the two would have caused spoilage and smells worthy of being banished to the far desert. Either way, the thought of an ancient Persian simultaneously chilling sorbet and aging cheese underground is kind of delightful. You sit on a stone ledge and lean back, letting your thoughts drift toward something colder. Sherbet. Not the rainbow kind you grew up scooping from tubs at birthday parties, but sharbat, the Persian original. Infused with rosewater, sour cherries, and ice shards shaved by hand. This wasn't just a treat, it was a cultural ritual. There are records of nobles being served chilled drinks in glass vessels wrapped in silk, the ice sweating slowly as musicians played lutes in the background. You can't prove it, but you suspect even the drink sighed in relief. Imagine, A servant emerges from the yakshal at dusk, hands trembling slightly from the cold, carrying a lacquered tray with glass bowls. Inside, crushed snow and fruit syrup. A sprig of mint. Maybe a single petal resting on top. Then the cooling breeze of a badger catches the scent, and the entire courtyard inhales peace. That's not hyperbole, it's infrastructure as hospitality. You trace a crack in the wall near your shoulder and wonder how long it's been here. Decades? Centuries? There's something comforting about the way time clings to these materials. Clay, stone, water, no batteries to corrode. No beeping timers. Just cycles and elements. You head back toward the exit, blinking as sunlight floods your vision again. The air outside hits like a wool blanket wrapped in fire. But now you know the tricks. You smile at the yakshal behind you like it's a knowing friend, one that's quietly seen every drought and feast for centuries. As you make your way through the alleyways again, you start noticing how these principles extend everywhere. Market stalls built beneath overhanging walls to catch shade. Narrow streets angled to maximize airflow. Courtyard homes with central pools and columns carved with vents. You're walking through an engineered landscape, not a city thrown together by chance. In fact, some historians believe entire neighborhoods were zoned by thermal logic, with shaded courtyards placed in social centers and wind corridors intentionally left unblocked. Urban planning wasn't about cars. It was about comfort. You finally reach a small tea house nestled between two thick adobe walls. Inside, the air smells of cardamom, smoke, and mint. You sip from a cup of warm tea. Yes, warm. Because in the desert, hot drinks can make your body sweat just enough to cool you naturally. You shake your head. Everything here is upside down, and yet it works better than most things you know. Outside, the sun begins its descent, painting the mud brick walls with long shadows and honey light. You glance at the rooftops once more and spot another badger, a younger one, maybe, or recently restored. Still catching wind. Still listening. Still cooling. You sit a little longer in that tea house, letting the steam from the cup drift lazily into your face, like a miniature desert mirage of its own. Outside, the light has turned that rich golden hue that makes even sand look luxurious. And now, your curiosity tugs again, not just toward the architecture or the ice pits or even the wind towers, but toward the people who used all these things. How did daily life actually feel in this climate, where heat was a constant and ingenuity was baked into survival? You step out again into the alley, now softened by dusk, and imagine you're someone else entirely. A craftsperson in ancient Yazd, maybe. You walk in their sandals, duck through their shaded doorways, and begin to notice the rhythms of desert living not just as responses to climate, but as a kind of cultural choreography. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Persians scheduled their entire lives around temperature shifts. Morning was for baking bread, drying laundry, and visiting the public bathhouse. Midday, you took refuge indoors, usually in the coolest room of the house, the sardab, a basement space often connected to both the badger and the khanat for natural cooling. Work resumed in the early evening, with socializing and eating often spilling out onto rooftops under the stars. You wander through one of these homes now, imaginary, sure, but carefully reconstructed in your mind. Clay walls thick as mattresses, painted tiles, a courtyard shaded by a pomegranate tree. Inside, you find the sardab. The air is heavy but cool, almost damp. A woven mat lies in the corner. A few clay jugs sit in the shadows, their surfaces beaded with condensation. You lie down, and for a moment, everything goes still. That's when you hear it, not the wind, but a low hum. A conversation through time, carried by water and architecture. And now, for your quirky tidbit. In some cities, upper-class Persians allegedly trained servants or children to act as human fans, wafting breezes with large palm fronds dipped in rosewater. This sounds extravagant, but also faintly tragic when you consider the labor behind comfort. Then again, historians still argue whether this was widespread or just a rare indulgence in palatial estates. Some say the idea is a romantic exaggeration borrowed from later Persian poetry, where every noble had a peacock feather fan and a sherbet boy in waiting. Others believe there's truth to it, especially considering how intensely status and hospitality were intertwined. Cooling wasn't just comfort, it was a flex. And speaking of status, rooftop sleeping was a nightly ritual for many, but with a pecking order. In some cases, the higher the roof, the more prestigious the spot. You climb a set of earthen stairs now and emerge onto one of these rooftops, the city sprawling in low amber light around you. Pillows line the edges, families chatter softly over bowls of fresh fruit, and the occasional flute trill floats across from a neighboring house. Here, wind towers seem to sway like silent sentinels. They turn with the breeze, catching it, funneling it, and gifting it downward into dark rooms below. You lie back on a woven cot, gaze at the deepening sky, and feel that same soft current brush across your skin. No hum of AC. No buzzing fan blades. Just gravity and clever geometry. And if you were lucky, or noble, you might even have had a drip system built into your rooftop setup. A simple trick, clay pots suspended over your sleeping area, releasing droplets at regular intervals onto stone slabs that would cool the air around them as they evaporated. It's like having a desert version of a smart thermostat. Only quieter. And prettier. You hear a donkey bray in the distance, as if in mild protest to the setting sun. Someone plays a gentle rhythm on a daff drum nearby. Time in this world doesn't tick. It stretches, expands, sways with the wind and the hum of water in underground veins. Beneath your borrowed mat, there's probably a canet running still, one of those silent aqueducts that made all this possible. It carried not just water, but order. Homes were built with its flow in mind. Neighborhoods were arranged so that the coolest and most shaded zones fell along the right side of the slope. The canet dictated geometry, not just irrigation. You sip from a small clay cup again, something tart and cold, probably tamarind or sour cherry. And you think of the foods that sustain this climate. Dried fruits, barley stews, flatbreads cooked at dawn. Everything you realize was timed. Not just by hunger, but by heat. And then, maybe most telling of all, the soundscape of coolness. No electricity, but the creak of wooden doors, the tap of clay lids, the murmur of water underfoot, a lullaby of shadows and air. Now imagine, in some homes, women would hang wet linens across doorways at the hottest hour of the day, letting the breeze pass through and cool the entire room by a few degrees. It sounds basic, almost too simple, but it worked. Evaporative cooling at its finest. And if you were lucky, the linens might be soaked in infused water, rose, mint, sometimes even vinegar. You probably smell that even now, don't you? All around you, the ancient city exhales, as if in approval of your slow pace. No one rushes in this heat. No one fights it. They fold into it, like dough being shaped not with pressure, but time. You turn your head slightly to one side, gaze down at another alley far below, where a cat stretches on a warm step and refuses to acknowledge your existence. Smart creature. The stars are beginning to scatter across the sky. Not timidly, but boldly, like they've been waiting all day to show off. The desert night is cooler now. The wind from the badgers has found its rhythm again, that soft periodic sigh. Even the stones seem to settle. You curl your toes over the edge of the mat, let them dangle above the world for a moment. Somewhere in the distance, someone claps once, maybe twice, calling the children down from their own rooftop dreamscapes. And still the cold lingers. Beneath the house, in the pit of the Yakshal, in the flow of the canet, in the pockets of air caught inside ancient mud brick. It's not just temperature. It's design. It's memory. And it's waiting for you. The desert night deepens, and your thoughts drift to the peculiar inventions that made Persian cities feel like an oasis even when the sun was a relentless overseer. You're no longer just an observer but part of the very air moving through the lanes, slipping past mud brick walls that hold secrets as old as the shifting sands. You might have read about their ice pits and wind towers, but now it's time to discover the more unexpected, sometimes charmingly eccentric, technologies that ancient Persians dreamed up to keep cool. First, a mainstream historical fact to settle your mind. The Yakshal, or ice pit, was not just a hole in the ground but a masterstroke of ancient engineering. These massive, dome-shaped structures were built with special mortar that insulated the interior, allowing ice and snow collected from the nearby mountains during winter to be stored throughout the scorching summers. Imagine walking into one of these vast chambers, the air turning crisp and fresh like a sudden desert breeze, a refuge against the sweltering heat outside. But here's a quirky tidbit to keep you smiling as you lie back. Some yakshals had a clever drainage system that allowed condensation from the stored ice to water gardens planted nearby. In other words, ancient Persians used their ice storage not just for preservation but to nurture life in the desert. Think about that. Water dripping from ice into thirsty plants, a secret garden blooming because of clever cooling. Historians still argue whether the Yakshal's cooling effect was entirely passive or whether some ancient engineers tinkered with it by directing airflow or even adding salt to lower the melting point of stored ice. The debate lingers in scholarly circles, but one thing is clear: these were no ordinary iceboxes. They were feats of environmental adaptation wrapped in mystique. Now, you wander your mind's eye to a less obvious but equally fascinating cooling invention: the use of porous clay vessels called samovars or abanbars. These containers, filled with water, were often hung in shaded courtyards or near wind towers. The water slowly seeped through tiny pores in the clay, evaporating gently and cooling the surrounding air, a natural handmade air conditioner, if you will. As you imagine the slow drip of cool water through clay, your fingers brush a sun-warmed stone, and you can almost feel that evaporative chill. It's like nature and craftsmanship in perfect partnership, a whispered promise to those who waited patiently through the day's heat. But there's more. Have you ever heard of the Badger Whisperers? No, they weren't mystical beings, but skilled artisans and engineers who understood the intricate dance between wind, temperature, and architecture. They designed the Badgers, those famous wind towers, not just as static funnels but as adjustable devices. Some might have used movable wooden shutters or cloths to modulate airflow, redirecting cool breezes into rooms or pushing out stale hot air. It's a fascinating debate among historians whether these adjustable badgers were common or mostly reserved for royal palaces. Either way, the idea that ancient Persians might have had a protothermostat is delightfully charming and makes you wonder how many other forgotten tech secrets lie beneath those sun-baked walls. And here's a little cultural flourish. In some regions, cooling was as much about scent as temperature. Sprinkling rosewater or jasmine-infused water on mats and curtains created a fragrant, cooling atmosphere that not only refreshed the body but also lifted the spirits. Imagine drifting to sleep in a room scented with fresh petals, the cool air carrying whispers of a blooming garden you've never seen. Even the ritual of drinking cool beverages was carefully cultivated. Sweet sherbets made from pomegranate, sour cherry, or sour orange were sipped slowly, each gulp a tiny celebration of refreshment. These drinks weren't just thirst quenchers. They were social lubricants, stories told over shared cups in shaded courtyards, the cooling syrup trickling down your throat like a desert river. Historians still argue whether these practices were universal or varied widely across regions and social classes. Some suggest that only the wealthiest had access to such luxuries, while others think these traditions trickled down to common folk, becoming woven into everyday life. In any case, you're left with a sense of wonder at how much thought went into every cool breeze, every drop of water, every shadow stretched across a courtyard. It wasn't just about escaping the heat, it was about mastering it, coaxing it to behave kindly. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining yourself inside a yakshal, the cool stone beneath you, the faint drip of melting ice echoing softly like a heartbeat. Outside, the desert night is still, but inside, the air moves gently, alive with ancient secrets. Your mind lingers on one last image, a cluster of palm fronds, rustling quietly as someone waves them slowly, rhythmically, in time with the desert's own pulse. A human fan, perhaps, or just a neighbor offering a gesture of kindness in a hot, endless world. It's enough to make you believe that even in the harshest climates, comfort and ingenuity bloom quietly, patiently, just like the desert flowers waiting for the rare rain. The desert sun has long since set, but your journey through ancient Persian cooling methods continues, now shifting from clever structures to the everyday objects that brought relief. You find yourself in a bustling marketplace where artisans, merchants, and ordinary people all seek a little respite from the heat, each using their own tools and traditions. It's a lively scene, but instead of clamor, there's a calm rhythm to it, the gentle sway of woven fans, the faint drip of water from pottery, the whisper of fabric brushing skin. One well-known fact you can lean into: Persians were pioneers of portable personal cooling devices, like the handheld fan, or beidel, crafted from palm leaves or feathers. These fans weren't mere accessories, they were essentials, carefully decorated and passed down through generations. You can almost feel the soft flutter against your cheek as someone slowly waves one, each sweep cooling the skin and sending a faint rustle into the air. But here's a quirky twist: some fans were made from the feathers of peacocks or other exotic birds, prized not just for their function but for their aesthetic charm and even supposed mystical cooling properties. Imagine a fan that's both a status symbol and a practical relief from heat, gently swishing in the hands of nobles or poets reciting under the shade. Historians still argue whether the use of these fans was more widespread among the elite or embraced by everyday folk, especially in the rural desert villages. There's some evidence that simple reed fans were common, while the feathered variety remained a luxury, yet even a humble fan carried the promise of a cool breeze at your fingertips. Alongside fans, water jars wrapped in wet cloth were another popular method to cool the air. You can picture artisans carefully soaking linen in cold water and wrapping it around clay vessels, the slow evaporation cooling the liquid inside, and sometimes the surrounding air. It's a primitive but effective evaporative cooler, the concept so simple it's almost poetic. This technique wasn't unique to Persia, of course, but the local climate and resourcefulness made it especially useful here. In fact, some have suggested that these damp cloth wrappings inspired the design of more complex cooling methods later on, like the Yakshul's drip irrigation you met earlier. You might find it amusing that some merchants sold fragrant ice blocks. Think of them as ancient Persian popsicles, infused with rose or saffron, to wealthy customers who could afford the luxury of chilled treats in the desert. Savoring these icy sweets was less about nutrition and more a ritual of indulgence and cool comfort. Historians still debate how widespread ice consumption really was among ordinary Persians. Some argue that the preservation and transport of ice were costly and rare, limiting access, while others suggest that local ice harvesting communities ensured a more equitable distribution, at least seasonally. Beyond fans and water jars, another personal cooling device was the headscarf soaked in cold water, worn wrapped loosely around the head and neck to absorb heat. You can imagine the gentle drip of water soaking through fabric, evaporating slowly as you move, and offering a soothing contrast to the blazing sun. It's an intimate, tactile way to fight the heat, one that connects you directly to the elements around you. As you let these images settle, remember the rhythmic sway of the fan, the gentle drip of soaked cloth, and the sweet taste of fragrant ice, all small comforts woven into daily life. They remind you that cooling wasn't just about grand inventions but about simple, accessible acts repeated day after day. And if you ever think cooling must have been a lonely pursuit, think again. Persian courtyards were places where these simple comforts became social rituals. Sharing sherbets, passing around fans, or exchanging chilled water wasn't just practical, it was a way to connect, to slow down, and to enjoy the moment despite the desert's relentless heat. It's tempting to wonder, as historians do, how much these personal devices influenced later cooling technologies in other cultures. Did the Romans borrow from Persian fans? Did the concept of evaporative cooling spread along the Silk Road? These questions linger, adding layers of mystery to your night journey. So now, as you imagine a gentle breeze stirred by a palm leaf fan or the soft dampness of a wet scarf, you're reminded that keeping cool was, above all, a human art, an ongoing conversation between nature, ingenuity, and daily life. Your journey through the ancient Persian methods of cooling now drifts toward one of the most poetic and innovative inventions of the time, the Kanat system. Imagine walking alongside narrow underground channels carved deep beneath the desert sands, where cold water flows steadily, unseen but ever-present. These kanats weren't just about irrigation or drinking water, they were vital to cooling entire cities and sustaining life in a climate that could otherwise feel unforgiving. One firm historical fact is that kanats were marvels of engineering, stretching sometimes for miles, gently sloping to bring water from distant mountain aquifers to parched plains. Their construction was no small feat. It required precise surveying and tireless digging, but the result was a lifeline of cool water flowing quietly beneath the surface. You might smile at the fact that these kanats also helped regulate temperature above ground. The moisture from the water seeped into the earth, cooling the soil and the air in nearby homes and markets. Some homes were even built with openings directly above kanats, allowing cool air to rise naturally, an ancient form of air conditioning long before electricity was a glimmer in human imagination. Historians still argue whether the primary intent of kanats was irrigation or climate control, but it's clear that they served both purposes in a way that was both practical and elegant. The kanats' slow-moving water not only nourished crops but created pockets of cooler, more humid microclimates that made desert living possible. Alongside kanats, there were also the underground cool rooms, sometimes called shapestans, used as refuges from the searing midday sun. Picture yourself descending stone steps into these subterranean chambers where the air is noticeably cooler, almost damp with the earth's embrace. These spaces were often lined with stone or tile to maximize their cooling effect, making them perfect for relaxing, storing food, or even hosting guests during summer's fiercest heat. It's fascinating, and a bit quirky, that some shapestans were decorated with water channels running through the floors or walls, producing a soft, trickling sound that added a layer of ambient calm. Imagine lying back in that cool darkness, the gentle murmur of water like a lullaby, far from the blazing sky above. Scholars still debate the extent to which shapestans were used by all classes or reserved for the wealthy elite. While archaeological evidence shows grand underground rooms in palaces, smaller, simpler versions might have been common in everyday homes, though these are less often preserved or recorded. Another intriguing aspect is how kanats and shapestans reflected a deep understanding of natural physics. Ancient Persians harnessed gravity, evaporation, and insulation without formal science as we know it, relying instead on careful observation and tradition. It's a reminder that ancient technologies were often the product of generations of trial and error rather than sudden invention. As you let this underground world settle in your mind, imagine the cool earth under your feet, the distant rush of hidden water, and the faint echoes of footsteps in the shadows. This isn't just engineering, it's a sensory experience, a tactile link between humans and their harsh environment. Remember that earlier water jars wrapped in wet cloth, or the fans fluttering in the marketplace? Now you see how these smaller comforts fit into a larger network of cooling, from personal to communal, from surface to subterranean. Cooling in ancient Persia was truly a layered art, weaving together water, earth, and air. And as you feel yourself sinking deeper into the quiet cool of the shapestan, ready to drift off, you're reminded that sometimes the best relief is hidden from view, flowing silently just beneath your feet. As your journey through ancient Persian cooling methods nears its gentle close, you find yourself in the lush, shaded gardens, paradises in the desert, where water flows, birds sing softly, and the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and mint. These Persian gardens, or paradises, weren't just for show, they were living demonstrations of cooling in the harshest environments, designed to refresh the body and soothe the mind. It's well known that Persian gardens were carefully planned with water channels, pools, and fountains that circulated cool water throughout, creating an oasis effect. The sound of flowing water wasn't just beautiful but served to mask the harsh winds, contributing to a cooler, more pleasant atmosphere. But here's a delightful detail. The plants chosen were often aromatic and had a cooling effect themselves. You might be surprised to learn that ancient Persians deliberately planted herbs like mint and lavender, which release subtle cooling scents when brushed by the breeze or warmed by the sun. Historians still debate exactly how much these gardens influenced later Islamic and European garden designs, but their legacy as a combination of art, science, and environmental engineering is undeniable. Nearby, slender cypress trees cast long, cooling shadows, their dark green needles absorbing and deflecting sunlight. The layout of the garden was typically symmetrical and enclosed by high walls, which trapped cooler air inside, shielding inhabitants from the desert's heat and sand. A quirky fact to savor: some gardens included small windcatchers or badgers built right into the garden walls. These structures caught the slightest breeze and funneled it down to cool the air among the plants and pathways, making your walk through the garden a soothing, whispering experience. As you imagine yourself wandering through these shaded walkways, you recall all the cooling methods you've encountered, from fans and soaked cloths to cannots and underground chambers, and realize how they all converge here in one final, harmonious setting. The garden is a living symphony of water, shade, scent, and stone, carefully orchestrated to comfort against the desert's relentless sun. And as you prepare to leave this peaceful place, feel the lingering coolness in the air, the soft rustle of leaves, and the gentle drip of water, nature's lullaby, tuned for your restful slumber. Now, as we softly close this chapter of ancient Persian ingenuity, remember that these slow, deliberate strategies were less about conquering nature and more about coexisting with it, finding peace and coolness amid the heat, with patience and grace. You've wandered with me through sun-baked deserts, into shadowed chambers and fragrant gardens, where ancient Persians crafted comfort from stone, water, and breeze. The sun's heat, once relentless and unforgiving, has softened around you, now a gentle warmth you barely notice. Feel your breath slow, your muscles relax. Imagine the soft splash of water in a quiet pool, the cool dampness of a cloth against your skin, the tender flutter of a palm leaf fan. The world narrows to these soothing sensations, each one a small wave washing away the heat and fatigue. In this twilight moment, know that the art of cooling is also the art of patience, of harmony with nature's rhythms. The ancient techniques you've heard tonight weren't hurried fixes but slow, thoughtful responses to a challenging world, a reminder that sometimes the best relief comes not from force, but from gentle understanding. Let your thoughts drift like a breeze through a Persian garden, soft and slow. The coolness lingers, wrapping around you like a comfortable shawl, easing your mind, softening your senses. Now, dim the lights further if you like. Let the whisper of these stories fade gently into your dreams, carrying you toward rest and renewal. Good night, and sweet, cool dreams.